afternoon, everybody. How are you all doing? Good. I'm very honored to be here today as the keynote speaker, and I'm even more honored now because I get to be your pre-lunch stall. I know how hungry everybody is, so it's a big honor to be in this position. Hope I can fulfill the requirements. The reason I'm here today is summed up in the name of one person, and that is Ivor. Some of you may know Ivor. He was the keynote speaker here at the last luncheon 2 years ago. I think he would be very happy and honored that his wife was chosen to be the speaker at the 10th annual luncheon for Candice's Sickle Cell Fund. When Candice was first thinking about starting this organization, Ivor was one of the people that she consulted. And I still remember a young, seems like she was a teenager back then, coming to our home and meeting with Ivor and him giving her all the advice that he could share with her about what it would take to start a nonprofit organization. And then here we are 10 years later, and what an amazing organization she has created. And I just want to take a moment to say how proud I am of Candice and to give her a round of applause. Ivor and I were together for 22 years. When we got together in our 20s, believe me when I tell you, neither of us had any idea what we were in for. And I mean that in more ways than one. We loved each other very dearly. He was my best friend, my partner, my husband. There's not many words you can say to describe how deep our relationship was. I will tell you that right from the beginning, struggle and fear were a big part of our daily existence. Ivor had sickle cell SS. It's typically a very severe case of the disease. But I do want to just take a moment to say, because Candice and I had been talking about this prior to my giving this presentation, that there are some misconceptions about sickle cell. Not a lot of people know that sickle cell takes many shapes and forms. There are many different genetic types of sickle cell, and even within those genetic types, even though some are typically stronger than others, there's a great variability to this illness. You can take 10 people with sickle cell disease and put them in a room together, and their disease can look 10 different ways. And each of those people, you can look at them at any different part of their life, and their disease changes over the course of their lifetime. Some children with sickle cell are very ill in the early part of their lives, and then as they get older, their disease lessens. And sometimes it goes in the opposite direction. So this is a disease of great variability, great individuality, and it's a very demanding disease because you really have to take the time to know the patients. Sadly, there is no real cure for sickle cell yet, not in the sense that applies to all people with sickle cell. And so for medical practitioners, it can be a very unsatisfying disease to treat because there's no victory in sight. It's a chronic illness in the worst sense of the word. And the chronicity of that illness is something that can really wear on the people with the disease, their family members, and their caregivers. And so one of the things that I think Ivor really paid attention to was the day-to-day struggle and how to deal with the fear, the sense of oppression on a real moment-to-moment basis. One of the ways that he did this in his own life was by constantly reinventing himself and constantly revising his goals and his framework for dealing with what he expected out of himself. When I first met Ivor, he was a professional dancer. A very unlikely career for a person with sickle cell disease. At the time, he was undergoing regular transfusion therapy, which gave him the illusion of health by introducing healthy red blood cells into his body on a regular basis. Now, of course, that couldn't last forever because you can't live on blood transfusions forever, and at a certain point, his body began to reject them on a regular basis. So he had to revise his career plans. So he went from being a dancer to a dance instructor. Gradually, as he got older and his illness progressed, he could not teach the classes by himself, and he had to enlist the help of his sister Ina, who was also a professional dancer. When that even got to be too much, he began working in arts administration. And he also worked as a teacher and a counselor. Later on, when we formed our nonprofit organization, SCARE, Sickle Cell Advocates for Research and Empowerment, he became a professional healthcare advocate. And he and I traveled around the country presenting at local, state, and national conferences and meetings to members of the sickle cell community, health professionals, general public. We did pieces of media, radio, television, and such, trying to spread the word along the lines of what Candice was talking about earlier, the needs of the sickle cell community. Ivor had a great dream to politicize the sickle cell community towards the goal of empowerment in the same way that the AIDS community, the cancer community has done. We recognize that there are a whole host of reasons that have to do with the very complicated nexus of racism and classism in this country that have rendered sickle cell a less than funded and popular disease. Too complex to go into now, but I'm pretty sure you all understand what I'm talking about when I say that there's a layer of issues that affect this community that have made it more difficult to get this disease into the forefront as much as some other illnesses that affect other communities as a whole.